to buy this Chichibu. It's ridiculous. I can't buy this. I wish I could buy this. It's ridiculous. It's all your fault.
I've got holidays to go on next year.
In absence of having in absence of being able to actually taste it myself, I can report that Serge scored at 89 points on Whiskey Fun, and he managed to do that while referencing Boris Johnson only twice, which is pretty good going for him.
I have noticed that many of the things we sent to Serge recently have had a comment about Brexit embedded in there somewhere. Generally not.
Yeah, I had a card email today with a wheel coming off a car. It was a bit strange, right? It was like a Merry Christmas, and there was with a wheel coming off. I don't know what that means.
I know what you're referring to. Hang on.
Yeah. Yes.
I have to find it.
Oh, the Merry Christmas card from Whiskey Fun.
Yeah, I could probably do it on a share screen very briefly to show everyone what on earth is being discussed here. I mean, it's not very...
It's not currently on video, referencing a thing which is entirely... Thank you, John. You have understood the medium correctly.
So all these trucks in the airfield in Kent.
There you are.
That's it.
Don't drink and drive, people. Right, here we go.
All these trucks in Kent, exactly how many of them are full of the first release, Dornoch? Most of them, or half of them?
Well, our DHL truck had to get turned around, and then they went to the airport and shipped by air instead. So
not our DHL truck. We don't pay DHL trucks to drive.
Haven't you heard? There's a shocking lack of facilities for drivers, so they've been emptying these wee 50 cl bottles, every size, for leaving yourself in.
I have a question for Billy.
Hello.
Do you think that with the new plant that Chichibu set up, do you think that the prices will come down, or do you actually think they're just to make a quicker, faster buck?
It's one of the...
is it?
I think it's going to be a little while before this hits, the stuff in the new place hits what they need it to be in order to be released as stuff. And so they're going to have more stock of mature from the current place, and it's going to be one of those ones where I think we'll see the prices of some stuff come down as it becomes more available, but other stuff will still be these weird, wonderful, especially as stuff gets older from the current place. But also, we'll just see how the Japanese whiskey market goes. If it continues in the current ridiculousness, then yeah, especially if the current ridiculousness involves more regulation, at which point in time, a lot of the current stuff, which is Japanese, will no longer be Japanese. At which point in time, things can go even weirder and more wonderful. So I'll say, give it 6 months. We'll have a better idea, I think, just because not really in Japan at the moment. So,
to be Kurosani, he is obsessed with the idea of people drinking his whiskey. I've never met anyone more obsessed with the idea of people opening bottles. We had a conversation probably about 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, where he basically said, "Well, if I hate bottles on auction, I just want them to be drunk. I'd like a bar program." So we had to go out to the trade and try and sell casks, which sounds mental. Like, well, this should be easy. You have to buy a full cask, and you have to buy it up front, and you have to open all the bottles, and you have to show that you're opening the bottles. They're still appearing at auction because we can't stop it. But he is properly obsessed with the idea that everyone should drink their whiskey, and he really does not like the kind of secondary market of Chichibu.
Oliver, I agree with you 100%. That's why I always sell my empty bottles at auction. Oh, did I say that out loud?
The Chichibu bar program is generally going pretty well. You know, I just grabbed this round, I did a tasting a little while back with the club down in Bristol, and there's a load of bar bottlings in there, but they are bar bottlings which were specifically sampled up by bars who couldn't sell their bottles. So there's a lot of it getting out there, and the bars are generally pretty good, and folks are generally pretty good at opening bottles and making sure people have an open bottle if they sell it. But yeah, as you say, not everything.
We'll do another one for the whiskey bars of Scotland. The first one went pretty well.
Yeah. And if stuff's coming through the Whiskey Exchange, the labels are really pretty as well. So, but please don't do too many, because our head designer's really busy. He's got other stuff to do, and he's got stuff to do for me. So every time you guys bottle a whiskey, that's another day of him sitting there playing around with kanji characters on the label when he could be typesetting stuff for me. So don't do it too much. Sorry, Nikos, in the chat. I know you have other things to do, and I know you're an impatient man, but seriously, calm down, mate. Calm down. We'll get.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm just decanting. I've got 2 samples of this now. So
Yeah. Well, do you want me to start talking about is it me next? The sponge?
Let me.
our taskmaster. We do.
Who's next in the? I'll let me have a look.
We made enough jokes about refill and Chichibu and auction and flipping and secondary market nonsense.
Yeah, I think we should. Does anyone want to ask Lord Master Billy Abbott any more questions before we move on?
No, it's very good. It's great. It's good. And I'd just like to share that.
John has Drum and Rocket Wi-Fi.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually quite an appropriate thing that John Beach just floats in every now and again as a disembodied voice that nobody can see. In a way, it's a saving, you know.
Good Lord.
I've just opened.
Are you crazy?
Opened a bottle of Chichibu.
Shots.
Oh. Shots.
Oh, there he is. God, John, you're hiding over here. You're like 3 screens away.
I've got because.
Actually, I have something to say before we get too carried away, because I've just noticed we've got Bert Brunel in the chat, and I'd like to ask him a little bit about Shizuoka. If Bert wants to come up and say anything about Shizuoka, I've just thrown him under the bus there, so we'll see if he does or not. Because I am interested in what they're doing, and I've tried some cast samples, and I think they're making some pretty good stuff. Bert, do you want to say anything?
Did they get a higher score than you, Phil, for their release on Whiskey Fun?
Well, they
tempting, but I don't know. Did they?
They did, John, and I'm very impressed with what they're doing. I visited the distillery a couple of years ago, and I think it's great. I'm really excited. I think Tycho's really pretty obsessive about making good quality whiskey, but.
Well, Tycho is really obsessed of making quality whiskey, and it's really the man making his dream come true. I mean, I was there the first time in September 2014, and he took me just to a piece of land. And then he told me, I will build distillery here. I said, what? I said, I will build distillery here. And then they started building, and I saw the building that was coming up it's just beautiful. So the distillery is very nice. And then I believe it was the end of 2016 when the Karuizawa installation was for sale, and he bought it at auction. And out of the 4 stills, only 1 was still working. So he has 1 in the distillery, and the 3 other ones are in the warehouse being decoration. So they also have the malt mill from Karuizawa, which dates from 1989, I believe. But that one broke down this week, so they had to repair that one. So the whole production was being stuck. But the cask samples I tasted so far were all very nice. I saw scores of search on Whiskey Fun of 91 for new make, which is, I mean, I haven't seen too many new makes passing on Whiskey Fun, so we can't maybe compare to other ones. But what they do make is high quality, and it's high level and really, really good. So my bottles of the Prolo K are on their way, so I'm very curious for tasting, to be honest.
Yeah, we've got a bottle coming as well. I'm very excited to try it. And are you going to give us a song while you're here, like you do?
Yeah, something from Queen, maybe.
My microphone here is the same. In Japan, I had a good microphone, but my microphone here is poor quality, so I'm afraid that won't work.
I have to say, if anybody gets a chance to go to Chichibu Festival, it's probably one of the. I've had the most fun I've ever had in my life.
Yeah, I've never laughed as much as I laughed at
last 2 years. In fact, it was just a few weeks before lockdown that me and Phil and Simon were there, and it's just a complete joyous occasion. Really, absolutely brilliant. Best people, best time. Fantastic. It's kept me going all year, to be honest. Actually, the fact that I got there in February. Anyway, that's.
Yeah, great.
So,
thanks for that.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Anyone else want to talk about how shit their year's been at all? Okay, so The next dram we're going to have is from Mr. McGrail, to Mr. Angus McGrail, from Whiskey Sponge. And we have this lovely 29-year-old blended malt. So, Angus, feel free to say some words. I'll mute John for
You're
you.
not muted.
No, I'm muted.
Can you mute John first so I can say things? So I probably shouldn't have chosen this one because it's basically just a signatory bottling, which I persuaded Des to let me put in a Whiskey Sponge bottle. But it's got a nice story, and it basically just tastes like liquefied Christmas. And what is Christmas about if not marketing? So the story is that there's a bottling that a lot of you looking through the names here will know called Signatory Supreme, which was released in 1997. And that was a mix of sort of a hodgepodge mix of cask samples that they had then. And then this was put together about 13 years ago, and it was all the cask samples that they kind of accumulated since then. And it was all single malt, Scottish single malt. It was all aged minimum 16 years. But there was lots of much older stuff as well. So it was all the cask samples for signatory bottlings from really the late 90s to early 2000s. So a lot of stuff that was already from full-term old school sherry casks, lots of 60s and early 70s, lots of closed distilleries. So quite a nice snapshot of time. That all got married together into a fresh sherry butt, well, in two fresh sherry butts actually. And this is one of them. They were both pretty much identical in character. And this was one of those casks, and I just decided to do it as a combination of a pun that I thought of randomly to go with a Paul McCartney album, and I thought it tastes Christmassy, so we'll do it as a Christmas bottling. That's all there is to it, really. I like it a lot. I love the whiskey. I think it's really, you can tell it's quite old style. I think for me, it's got that very flinty, mineral, quite lean, almost like Rancio style sherry. It's just a style that I'm a big fan of. When I tried it, I was immediately impressed. I thought, okay, this is a sort of old style sherry whiskey, the character of which you don't normally find this day and age. So I was happy to find it and happy to bottle it. It's not really like what I try to do with Whiskey Sponge generally, which is take a more interventionist approach to independent bottling and to decide very deliberately to play around with things like bottling strengths or mixing casks together or whatever. So my view with independent bottling is that it's more interesting to take quite a decisive interventionist approach. But with this one, we just bottled it as it came, and very happy with it. So rather than ramble on, if anyone of you have questions about what we're doing with Sponge or anything like that, then I'll happily answer them here, or we can just move on.
I remember having the Signatory Supreme on the bar, and it came with a little bit of paper on the inside, or was it built into the box? That
yeah,
gave
there
you
was a scroll on the inside.
Oh
of it.
yeah, it was a scroll, yeah, and it gave a breakdown. Was it? There's a lot. There's like all the crazy stuff in there.
Yeah, Glenn Flagler,
Signatory Supreme first edition. So this is really an unofficial. It's like an independent bottling of an independent bottling of an unofficial second edition that doesn't exist of something that originally existed, which was independent from someone else. So the original Signatory Supreme had lots of, I think it had grain whiskey in it as well. I think it was a blended whiskey, whereas this is just blended malt. But the original list for Signatory Supreme, the first edition, is mental. But they put it into a silly decanter with too much air at the top, and I'm not sure how good that whiskey is now.
No, it's
the mix of stuff, it had 60s Lafroig, 60s Ardbeg, 1959 Lochside, shit like that in it. So yeah, I don't know the list of drams in this one. If Des is privy to that information, he has not shared it with me.
Yeah, well, we've got loads of odds and ends lying about the distillery, and to start doing blended stuff, we'd have to pay £1,620 for the verification. But it'd just be with the paperwork you have to keep on it, it would just be an absolute nightmare. If you're throwing in all these kind of like odds and ends and stuff that was left in the pump at the end of a bottling run. It'll be really cool, but it'll just be a paperwork nightmare.
Andrew had to write to HMRC and request special permission to do this, basically. And I don't think it contains all the many, many litres of dog ends of actual bottles that they've kept over the years. It's mostly just, well, as I understand it, it's all cast samples. So
I think anyone who receives a strongly worded letter from Des is probably going to do what it says in the strongly worded letter.
Oh yeah, he's a terrifying man. I mean, that
would include HMRC, right?
Yeah, it would include HMRC.
would brick it if there's phone.
So it's basically an infinity bottle.
Yeah, basically.
Or cask, infinity cask.
It's a limited infinity bottling, yes.
You should pitch that idea to your boss and see what he says. The terroir infinity.
I don't want to go near him over the Christmas.
Yeah, so seeing lots of nice comments. Where can I find the bottle? Unfortunately, it's sold out quite fast. Basically, with Whiskey Sponge, we tried to build a direct sales model, and we're finding the same problems that you find with Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Any of these people that are just dealing in single casks or small batch bottlings and sell them direct. Same with Thompson Brothers. Things sell out and people are disappointed, and they go fast. We're going to launch a new website, which will hopefully be ready late February, early March, and that's going to make it easier to limit sales a bit more and to make sure more people are able to get bottles. We'll probably start to run some ballots and things like that as well. So we're doing our best to try and muddle through, but yeah, it's been successful, so I can't complain too much. So delicious. Old style nose. Yeah, it is quite old style. Is this coming in a signatory bottling as well? No, not this specific liquid. So this is one cask. There is another cask, which I'm sure that Signatory will release themselves at some point. But as I understand it, there's no plans to do that just yet. If I can, I'll try and just bottle the rest of it myself. I'm very lucky. We have a good relationship with Signatory, and I'm probably one of the few people that can pester Des without being quietly assassinated in the back of a Dunwich warehouse.
You are a very convincing person, Angus. That's for sure.
I'm a very annoying person, that's true.
I think it's excellent. I think it's very good whiskey. I was super impressed when I got the bottles.
I think people saw a comment here saying highlights how good blended malts can be. I think a lot of the character and the quality of this is just down to the fact that, so it says 29 years old on the label, but the vast majority of this will be probably 30, 35 years plus. So you've got the effect of different ages marrying together, different cask types, different eras of production. And it's the fact it's sat in one cask, just marinating in a big chemical soup for 13 years. It's really and it's a nice easy strength, 45.6%. So just everything about it is pleasurable, easy, but it's still got quite a lot of specific character, which I would obviously describe as old style. This kind of very mineral, leathery, rancio sherry style.
Did you reduce it at all, Angus, or was that?
No, this was natural strength as it came from the cask. Can you send a link up front in future? No, Marcel, because it's you and you're mean to me constantly. If anyone wants to buy our bottles, go to our website, Decadent Drinks, and you can sign up to our mailing list, and you can get. That'll be the best way for you to get bottles, is to sign up to our mailing list. I'll send a link to the website. So there's a question there. Do you sometimes have problems because of your jokes? I mean, my whole life, I don't know. For me, very fun, but Dr. Bill or Mr. Nose, right, so far, the only legal letters we've had are from the McTeers auction house when I said to them, when I wrote a sponge post saying McTeers to auction genuine bottle of whiskey for a change. They didn't like that, and they sent a legal letter. Then I got one from Rare Whiskey 101. I basically said something I thought was pretty truthful about them being fairly disingenuous with their promotional stories. And I got you can go back on Sponge and read the apology they made me publish. I just changed all the the fonts and the stresses of the words to make it sound nonsensical. So occasionally we get legal issues, but not for the labels so far. I know in the case of Bill Lumsden, he's a fan of the sponge. In fact, I think his children print out the sponges when he's mentioned and keep them. So yeah, generally it's okay. I think most people in the industry recognize that it's from a place of reasonable affection and it's not really intended to be horrible, except maybe Macallan.
But Angus, you have literally sold out.
Yeah, completely
of
sold
this
out.
whiskey and all the other whiskies as well.
Can I check, when you say Macallan, do they understand that it's not from a position of affection, or that they don't understand that it's from a position?
Well, put it this way, I think Macallan's the only company to have had a board meeting about the whiskey sponge.
That's not true.
Oh, right. Okay.
Dornoch Distillery has many board meetings about you, Angus, and
Yeah.
we're very important in the whiskey industry. All 5 of us.
Every Thursday, 3 p.m. No, White in the early days, White and Mackay did as well. They weren't quite sure what to make of it, and
Inverhouse certainly had a problem. No, that wasn't necessary.
No, that was.
We had a chat of a bacon sandwich. Does that count?
The image of Richard Pattersponge in a mankini with seagulls shooting on his kneecap. I can see how that would have potentially caused issues with Richard Patterson at White and Mackay. But I asked Des about it at Signatory, and he said, "Well, we have a very good relationship with Richard Patterson, and I would have words with him if there were any issues." So it was fine. The only label that's
making a pipe bomb
refused. Signatory wouldn't let me use a label of Andrew Symington blow darting tourists on the Edredire car park.
Unbelievable.
But one day it might work its way. It coincided, unfortunately, with COVID.
Is that because the truth hurts? Like,
Do they not have that? They can do the artwork wrong.
Well, I think it just coincided with COVID, and Des didn't want dead bodies appearing on one of their product labels. Literally verbatim quote. So I'll get to it once this whole thing passes. We'll get to the.
He is quite a sensitive soul, isn't he, at heart? Shall we? Does anyone want to say anything else, or shall we move on to something else?
Where do you get your cognac from? So we source so far from Groperan in the Cognac region, Guillaume Groperan, and what I try to do, because he provides cognac for a few different I try to make little marriages of different casks together to make our products unique. So with the 1969 we just sold out of was a marriage of 5 different casks of cognac, 69 Petit Champagne. The next release is a 1968. In fact, I haven't shown anyone this. I'll show you the...
John, you're going to get banned in a second.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'll show you quickly our next bottling of cognac, because I'm very proud of it, and I think I think it is the best one we've done so far. I think the liquid is incredible, and this will come on sale in January. The 1968 Finbois, and it's at 55.4%, and it's absolutely magnificent. So, and it's got a slightly weird French
box as well. You've got a lovely box with it as well.
They come with it. They come with it standard from Groperan. I actually would rather not have the box because I'm against superfluous packaging in general. But yeah. Anyway, no, Groperan is amazing. I agree. He's a bit of a hero of mine. In fact, I think independent whiskey bottlers could learn a lot more from the French and what they do with their spirits, particularly Armagnac cognac, and that's where I get a lot of influence from. Anyway, enough from me. I've spoken enough. Someone else take over.
I think, I agree with you. I think people should take a little bit more interest in what they're doing in cognac and Armagnac. Certainly when it comes to Simon talking about dilution a lot and talking about what they do in cognac, where they essentially take a heavily diluted cognac and dilute their cognac with the heavily diluted cognac instead of just going for water, which is pretty cool. Lots of fun stuff. So we're going to move on to the next whiskey and the next guest of the evening, which I'm quite excited about. So originally this was meant to be John Beach because Inverness, John Beach, it was kind of ties in. But thankfully, Arthur was free and is able to sort of say a few words about this distillery as well. So just to kind of go into the details before we pass over to these guys, it was this is the Glenvor 8-year-old, 57% bottled by Gordon MacPhail. 80s.
I can't find it, Phil. I've got Glenmore.
Yeah.
But what was one? What was one you talking about?
Glenvor.
Sorry.
Or Glenmore. Okay. So just before we start.
Which one do you want?
I think it's time for bed.
Okay. So I'm going to pass over to John Beach and Arthur Motley. It's worth mentioning that this bottling here, we needed 2 of them. We needed 2 bottles for the whole tasting, and it turned out that I bought one from a friend of ours, and we had another bottle of our own at 57% alcohol, and both of them were labelled in exactly the same way. So the little dent on the back of the bottle that kind of guides it in the bottling machine the label was in the same position over the dent on both of the bottles, which implies to me that it came in the same bottling run. I tasted both of the bottles side by side. I thought they were pretty much identical. So,
yeah, hand bottled.
They were hands bottled, yes.
Hands bottles.
Right, John, do you want to talk a little bit about Glenmore or Vor? Arthur has some very interesting information, and
yeah,
you'd also promote his very amazing YouTube channel that he does. With
absolutely,
the royal family. So on you go.
Yeah, this Inverness whiskey. There were 3 distilleries in Inverness in the 80s, and this was one that closed in 1983. Milburn closed in 86, and I think Glenalbyn closed in 83 as well. I actually had a bottle of this for ages, and when Angus, in a previous life, used to travel around the Highlands searching out cupboards full of old whiskies, he used to pay for his food and accommodation with bottles, and he left me with this half bottle, the same one as this half bottle, 57% Gordon MacPhail, and it's very good. I read a few things online today about in books and online about Glenmore or Glenvor, and basically they all seem to think it was where Glenalbyn was, because it says there's now a supermarket there, but actually that's where Glenalbyn was, and Glenmore up to recently had a branch of General George and PC World. Neither of them supermarkets, both selling non-essential items, unlike supermarkets. And but it's great. I read today that Glenvor is widely considered to produce the best whiskies, but I think out of all the 3 Inverness whiskies, I think Glenalbyn's. I've had the best whiskies probably from Glenalbyn, but this is excellent. It's great. Who's been to Inverness? Is anybody planning on coming to Inverness in next spring and summer, maybe travelling around?
Us through.
No? Good.
I've got your bottles to smash, John.
Yeah, that's right. Bottle was... That's right.
There's a couple of Dutch guys here with camper vans who are planning on driving up to Loch Ness next year.
The interesting thing about Glenvor and Glenalbyn is that they were the only 2 distilleries that used plastic and cement in their mash bill.
Are you right enough there, Angus? A few years. Another thing I tried to find today was an old copy of Whiskey Advocate from before, when it was good, and a friend of mine, Johnny McCormick, was here for a tasting I did, part of the Loch Ness Whisky Festival, which will happen again one day. And I put a thing in the newspaper in Inverness Courier a couple of weeks before, just saying anybody that used to work at any of the Inverness distilleries, contact me. And I got 4 different people. 2 of them were a married couple. Is this the bottle you're talking about, Angus?
Yes, that's the one. I mean, I know that batch, and it's notoriously awful. So I really saved you from a bad whiskey there, John.
Still smells great, though. Smells like kind of damp cardboard, to be honest.
John, I kind of feel like you You did all of your research this afternoon when you were a bit pissed.
I did, yes. I've been so busy. So busy.
So on that note, I think we should pass over to Arthur, who does have
very just like to say, when everybody arrived, he used to work at this distillery. For the first half hour, before I let anybody speak, as usual, I said Glenvore this, Glenvore that. And then the first guy that spoke, a guy called Jimmy Lawless, who's retired, lives in Inverness. He was a stillman at Glen at that distillery. And he goes, when I worked at Glenmore Distillery, this is what I did. And I went, right, okay, it's Glen. From then on, for me, it's been Glenmore. So that's it. Glenmore, unless you speak Gaelic, Glenmore. That's it. Over to you, Arthur.
Glenmore it is. Okay, I'm moving to Glenmore now. That's good. All the evidence I need. So
sorry, I didn't introduce your full name. It's Arthur Votley.
So £10.
I work at Royal Mile Whiskies, but I've also got a side project for fun with Dave Broom. For years, we'd come up to each other at events and kind of with old bits of paper and ephemera and objects and kind of tested history on each other because, well, a lot of it seems to be wrong. And I know a lot of the people on this call kind of recognise kind of inconsistencies about how, dates of distilleries, be it Lefroy or whoever. And we had this vague idea that we would do a book one day, but books are difficult to get off the ground. And then, so when lockdown came along, we realised this was quite a good opportunity and actually quite a good format to show interesting objects, ephemera and paper and documents, but with kind of amateurish enthusiasm. So we're not claiming to be historians, but we can certainly tell nice little stories with these little objects. So that's what we're doing. It's called The Liquid Antiquarian. It's on YouTube. We did one little series of 3 shows, which we were really pleased with. One on rum and Scottish links to slavery, one on the 1823 Excise Act, which is totally wrong in the books as far as I'm concerned, and another one, champagne in the First World War through postcards. Anyway, so that's a preamble. But what we've also found is we want the channel to be a bit of a kind of lightning rod for other people to come forward with the little objects that they've got and the little documents that they've got and the little things that they found interesting, and us kind of curate it together because we know there's lots of this stuff out there. So Glenvore, what I'm going to show you is this is an example. This isn't mine, but it's an example of stuff that people have at home that can't necessarily be published because you can never get a publisher to publish it. But shitting fucking hell is it interesting. Anyway, so these are the original 1894 architect plans for Glenvore Distillery. So I'll just work out how to share screen. Here we go. So you got that?
Yeah.
So that's just a sheet. There's more than just the architect plans we've got here. There's also the jobs list, lots and lots of invoices over a long period of time. I'll set the slideshow running. No, hang on. Just wait a moment while I totally fuck this up. Is that all right with everyone? Great.
Arthur, were these at auction recently on eBay?
You're very astute. Yes. So.
No, I was bidding on them. That's why.
Well, I don't think you would have been bidding on these specifically because that was the original source. Yes. A gentleman who sold a number of things off on eBay, but which he in turn got from a car boot sale in Ingleston about 15 years ago or 20 years ago. But he was selling off bit by bit, and then there was the heart of the collection, which I'm going to show you a little snapshot of. So, yeah, that's just a nice, sexy shot. That signature there you'll see is Charles Doig, you all heard of. There's a nice aerial shot from the side, the kiln.
It's not moving on.
Yeah, it's not moving on, Arthur. We're just getting the one single.
Okay. Bear with me. Right, let's go like this. How about this? Screen sharing is paused. Okay. I'm going to have to do it one by one. Hang on. I told you we should resume share. Okay, I got it.
Is this beauty shot we'll be looking at? Is it one beauty shot? That's okay. JPEG, is it?
Hang on. What about that? You can't see that, no?
It only works. Don't make your thing full. If you make it full screen, it won't change pages. It's really annoying. So just make it normal.
Okay. Bear with me one sec. Right. But I want to make it big.
I want to make it.
Right.
Wrong webcam. Sorry.
Okay. So, what about that one? You see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's an invoice from, I think that one was a company down in Leeds. And that signature there you'll see is Charles Doig. Is the screen changing now? So do that.
No, you can't make it full screen. You have to make it a window, otherwise it won't change pages.
Okay. New share. Let's try that. That one, is that right?
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And you can still see it if I do that, yeah? So that's obviously a plan aerial shot. You see the ton room down bottom left. Lovely entrance room there, the brewer's office, the mill room, the distillery office, and probably, I think, the excise office there. Right, let's get another one in. Got that?
No.
No, it's doing that dickish thing again. Share screen. There you go.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful, beautiful paper, all hand drawn, like incredible draftsmanship, like just beautiful penmanship. So that's the kiln, obviously. I mean, I feel like it's when you go around, when you show someone around your house and you're trying to sell it, and this is the bathroom. We know it's a fucking bathroom. It's got a bath in it. You all know what a kiln looks like. That's a kiln. Let me. Sorry, it's a bit clunky. That, you got that?
Yeah.
So that's a nice side-on elevation. And then just because I knew my crowd, you got that okay? I put the yeast store in there. Oh, Phil.
Simon.
So, yeah, that's just a little snapshot of it. And there's a lot more work to be done on that one particular one, Glenvaux, and it's probably going to come too soon for our next series, which is going to be late in January, and we've already got loads and loads of subjects lined up for that. So, because there's such a depth of invoices and so much actual content for Glenvaux, we're going to have to spend a good amount. Sorry, Glenmore. Sorry, John, Glenmore.
Yeah.
We're going to have to spend a bit more time looking at it. But I mean, the hours that I've spent on it so far, it's really clear how you've got this situation where I think the date you often hear is 1892, isn't it, with Glenmore? But they must have built a small distillery and then suddenly had to expand it very quickly. And then again, had to expand it very quickly. So it kind of shows this trajectory of the industry doing really, really well. They must have barely finished their first distillery before they're expanding it and then expanding it again, and all the invoices kind of track this. And it's there's lots of really interesting shit in there, basically.
If you, I don't know if you can see behind me. I don't know how to share a picture on this, but a few years ago I was given this picture behind me. If you look, that's a plan of Glenalban Distillery, and it's from like Edwardian times, so just after the turn of the century last century. And it's funny because
specific weather forecast.
Because yeah, in Inverness it's raining, as it always is. I was reading earlier on the Glenalban at some point turned into a flour mill, and that was at the end of the 19th century. So, but that was after Glenmore opened. So maybe Glenmore opened and Glenalban thought maybe it's not a good time. Maybe it shut and then converted to a flour mill. And then come the beginning of last century, it started up again as a distillery. But you can see that's at the basin there with Glenalban Distillery beside the basin. And when you see these little photographs of the water and the warehouses, it looks like the warehouses are very small, but actually they're on the other side of the basin. So they're actually about 30 foot high. But they all got knocked down. Everything got demolished in 83. Most distilleries got demolished in 83, Diageo ones. And I believe, what I found out at the... when I had these guys around from ex-staff was there was a lot of, what's that stuff called? Asbestos in them. And they had to get rid of these buildings really quickly before the rules came in that they had to actually dispose of the building properly. So they just knocked them down. I've got a friend in the village here whose father actually went into all the ruins and picked up loads of old books and stuff from the offices. He's got them. I've never actually seen them, but and it's not so much the plan of the building, but it was all the distilling records and stuff. I actually should try and dig that up. That's
that would be great, John. I mean, maybe we can do Glenball special or Inverness Distillery special, something like that.
It's amazing how nobody's reopened. There's not, considering the amount of distilleries that are opening left, right, and centre. You'd think Inverness by now something would have happened, but maybe it's probably not the best time just now, to be honest. Maybe it's the best time, actually. I don't know.
Yeah, probably the best time.
Yeah. But Arthur, I tuned into your rum and the one about the other one, not the champagne one.
The Excise Act.
They're both excellent, brilliant, fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
I would agree.
Brilliant, spot on.
I think I put a link in the group chat for the page, so I think you should all go on Facebook and then go on YouTube and check it out because it's very, very interesting. And what have you got lined up for the next series, Arthur? Is there anything you can disclose just now, or?
Well, we're kind of dancing around a number of subjects and then reading and buying a lot of stuff and this is how it happened the last time, and then we just fix on 3 for the last week, slightly at the last minute. But under discussion is we're going to do women and booze, the Dutch. We're quite interested in the Dutch at the moment.
Something's got to be.
Yeah, no, there's lots of admire the Dutch.
Everybody likes
Captain Barclay, Madame Pommery. There's lots of things we want to do. So we're just trying to get Christmas retail out the way, and then I'm going to take a bit of time off, and then we're just going to put finishing touches to things. But we're also archivists have also been getting in touch, which is fantastic. Ooh. And the industry also, we hope, that because there are some fantastic archives there, which not everyone gets to see. I've had to have a little look around. But there's so many more stories that have not yet been told, because the only way they get told is through brand story, quite typically. And I think it's a really unexplored area. I think whiskey, there's grand histories that try and tell the entire history of whiskey, but we've all moved beyond that now. And there's a richness there that we've barely even started to look at, as far as I'm concerned. So anyone, get in touch. If you've got little weird things, little ideas that have been bugging you forever, get in touch. We're happy to collaborate with people. We reference and credit everyone who's got involved and contributed, and we hope that we'll get lots of input from people, as we already have.
We've got a really interesting book about White Horse, Simon, haven't we?
This is the Heather thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Arthur's already had his fingers all over it, haven't you, Arthur?
Yeah.
Because
webcam again, Simon.
Yeah, I couldn't find it, and I was looking all over the place for it, and it turns out it was in a Royal Mile Whiskies bag on the shelf. So, but yeah, I'd be curious. A friend of mine's doing some historical brewing and distilling projects at the moment, and he was asking about use of botanicals, specifically heather, in the mash. And we had the example in the 1920s in Lagavulin, where they were still using, or they were using heather bloom in the mash at that point in time. I'd be curious to see if there's been any other historical examples of heather bloom being used while mashing for distilling. That would be particularly fun.
Whiskey has been made many more ways than is currently discussed, and until a lot more recently than people give it credit for. And that's something that I didn't realise until I started digging around. You start seeing that up until the late 19th century, there were a lot more techniques than I'd ever heard about. So we're doing a lot of work on that, we will probably start to advertise topics that we're doing a little bit in advance, so more people can come out in the woodwork and contribute as well with stuff that they've seen, because it is really time consuming finding this stuff, but it is there. But the story of whiskey is really different to what I thought it was, basically. But I should actually say we're not just doing whiskey; we're doing all drinks. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. Cool. Next dram. Gotta be next dram.
Yeah, it has to be.
Hang on. I am taking a huge. No, just hang on.
Lots of questions.
Nikos didn't say when's the next dram, so I think, John, we're taking that as a huge credit. That's a huge win for us.
I think it was super interesting, and everyone should go and check out your YouTube channel. We watched it. It's great. So please do. We're all very excited for the next few videos, so please.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Keep doing more, and we're delighted you could make it to the tasting tonight. Thank you,
Phil. Do you think once you retired in your 90s, 100 years old, these young people will be coming and asking you questions about your distillery and your whiskey, and what do you think?
You just sounded very slurry there. I don't know if it's your internet connection. It sounded like you're drunk.
I'll switch my subtitles on.
You're correct, Phil.
I wouldn't even think that far.
Do you think maybe in the future there might be some crazy Dutch people going around and interviewing all the staff at the distillery, taking photographs and stuff?
We like the idea of confusing.
What do you think?
We like the idea of confusing Germans in the future. That's like one of our brand goals. Shall we? Is that what the big companies say? So we recently bottled bottle number, our cask number 1. Turns out there is actually 2 bottle number 1s of cask number 1. One is printed and one is unprinted, and we're delighted to really annoy some German in about 20 years' time. So on that note, we're going to move on. I can't remember who's next. Does anyone want to nominate themselves. Is
I'll
it
have a go.
Is it? I think it might be Daftmill actually. We haven't really heard from Johnny yet. I'll just check the lineup.
Yeah, I got all sort of flustered when Arthur started showing amateur pictures of his yeast store, and I haven't fully recovered, if I'm honest. But yeah, so shall I just talk about Daftmill? Is that how this is going? Is it?
I think you talk about whatever you want at this point. To be honest, that's
Yeah.
how it's
To be honest, it was that moment where John kind of slur on the screen. That was the most like being in a pub. I felt in March. John sort of like leaning. I kind of, if I could smell his breath, that would have actually just been just like being pissed with him, basically.
Just imagine halitosis meets 7-day-old haddock, and you're pretty much there.
Yeah, if the chap sitting next to him gives a full sort of description of what it's like, that'd be really good.
You've been giving yourself COVID haircuts still, I see.
Yeah, I quite like it. People sort of get out of my way on the pavement, which is probably just down to the virus. I think it makes me look slightly more threatening, which is the look I'm going for. So people, I don't think anyone really knows who I am beyond like Angus and Julie for Hamilton. But I work for Berry Brothers and Rudd, who have been doing overpriced independent bottlings far longer than anyone else. We have been paying way too much for casks for at least a century. So that's kind of my day job. And then within that, I sort of do, I guess you call it sort of brand management for Daftmill. I mean, we don't call it that because it's Daftmill, not Maxim. But, you know, I kind of work fairly close with Francis at Daftmill doing sort of commercial strategy stuff, if you call that for Daftmill. I feel like a total fraud talking about Daftmill. I mean, anyone that knows Daftmill knows that Daftmill is Francis Cuthbert and Francis Cuthbert is Daftmill. And there's really no one else, I don't think, that can do that justice. So I'm going to try and sort of talk a little bit about it. But, you know, if you want to know what Daftmill is about, you know, go and see the place, really. So, you know, Daftmill, I think everyone kind of knows, is a very small distillery in Fife. It kind of started about 2005. So it's one of the sort of first of the new wave distilleries. But it's really, you know, it started by Francis, who is first and foremost a farmer, you know, a proper teuchter, basically. And, you know, as his main business is a farm, the family's very lucky to, you know, own an estate, which has got a quarry and stuff. But he is like a sort of old school whiskey nerd, like the kind of person who buys bottles of whiskey and opens them. You know, he's like an old school whiskey nerd who, you know, loves kind of dwelling on whiskey forums, like that whiskey forum that used to be where everyone hung out. Like Francis used to just watch that religiously. And I think part of the reason he's had a distillery is so he can have his own chat room on the website, which I haven't brought this up with him yet, but, you know, he just loves the idea of having his own chat room. But he just loves whiskey. You know, he's really passionate about it, not in like a sort of like overly nerdy, analyze it to death sort of way. Not that any of us are like that, but in just a really authentic way. And he's lucky enough to be able to, you know, build himself a distillery basically, and also incredibly lucky to be able to fund the production. So he built himself a distillery. I mean, he was busy on the farm, which is his main job. The distillery doesn't do anything, doesn't produce anything, and he is out there growing the barley. And then the quiet season, which is sort of peak summer and peak winter, if you like, he goes into the garden shed, which for Francis is a distillery, and it literally is, you know, his house to the distillery is sort of like 40 meters. So it really is the kind of man cave, and he produces whiskey the way he wants to do it. And, you know, it kind of sounds like a marketing gimmick, but it's just not. You know, Francis is just the most kind of authentic man in whiskey. You know, Arthur will remember he did a tasting at Raw Mile Whiskies, and I was like, you know, well, if you thought we were going to get parked and stuff, and he's like, oh no, I haven't been to Edinburgh for about 10 years. I was like, oh, fuck's sake. And then he basically turned up in his fucking huge pickup truck, which isn't like a shiny thing with like fucking Highland gin on the side or anything. That's not a jag direct at Dornoch by any means. But you see a lot of brands have a fucking huge pickup truck because they want to look like Hardy. But Francis actually has a pickup truck, and he parked it on the pavement right outside Roma Whiskies. And then he walked into Roma Whiskies with one of his cask samples in an empty Glenrothes bottle. And then he stood there with like his, jeans pocket hanging out and a sheaf of barley behind his ear, just like totally authentic. And he's an amazing guy who, again, is very, very keen for people to drink his whiskey.
Johnny,
yeah.
I remember. I remember that tasting, and that's the other thing about Francis. Like, few words, a lot of them hilarious. But that tasting, you asked me to kind of co-host. Normally, people host a tasting, but I had to co-host, and it just after like 10 minutes, it just settled down to me asking 2-minute long questions, and Francis going, "I," and then another 2-minute long question, and him going, "No." And that was it, basically.
Well, I'll never forget the opening ceremony for Daphne. We invited a few dignitaries. Charlie McLean came along, and Blair Bowman had been polished and stuff. And like everyone gathered in the walled garden of Daphne, and this has been like a fucking 15-year journey from distillery to bottle. Everyone's there. Crowd round his family are there. Whiskey journalists, everyone's there. Just opened the first bottle of his whiskey. Like, do you want to say a few words? Cheers. One word. It's nuts. But I think moving on to this bottle in particular, this is kind of part of a drive with
Johnny.
Yes.
Can I interrupt here? Because I was there. He opened his bottle.
Sorry, John. You're just slurring.
You're on video somewhere.
Try again. You're coming across like a massive delay.
For some reason, I got an invite to the opening, the launch of Daphne, and Francis opened his bottle very slowly, poured it, sipped it, and his exact words were, "Aye, it'll do." That was it.
Exactly that. I mean, that he's a very humble man.
Absolutely right.
So this is kind of part of a plan to get people to sort of open bottles. Sort of by coincidence, we could only bottle. So we bottle with the illustrious Adelphi, and for various reasons, they could only bottle a certain size of batch. That kind of meant that no Daphne batch was much bigger than 1,500 bottles, which kind of had the effect of making it, super collectible, and people were just buying it to flip it. A bit like Billy was saying with Chichibu earlier. But again, for various reasons, that will be changing. So hopefully next year, we're still going to see single casks, and they are going to be difficult to encourage people to open. But we've got some plans around that, and it looks like the standard batch size there will be more of, and they'll be kind of easier to get hold of, and as well a bit more interesting. So like the next 2009 summer release, is that right? Yeah, summer release, which will be out in January, is a vatting of bourbon and sherry, for instance. And there's sort of vague plans for a cask strength release and stuff like that. So I think we're trying to make it so if you want to taste Daphne, you can do that without having to weigh up paying your mortgage or opening a bottle, because that's not really what whiskey should be about, and certainly not something that's kind of like. I hesitate to use the word like wholesome or pure, but Daphne is kind of innocent, weirdly, So I saw a few people asking questions, and I've basically run out of stuff to say. What cask was used? So this is interesting. So because this is only to be sold by the dram, we wanted a relatively small cask. So I was working with Angus on this one to select something for the whiskey bars of Scotland. So we picked a few casks with low fill. This is a first fill bourbon barrel, and I think you can taste it's kind of slightly oxidized in a good way. When whiskey's quite young, as I said, 10 years or whatever. Quite a low fill can just kind of I feel bring a kind of layer of kind of like custardy maturity into things. So I think this was like 110 bottles at a bourbon barrel. So, you know, probably a leaker or something weird happened. Yes, I can see Alex Bruce saying he bought a tank. I didn't want to say that, but basically Adelphia can now bottle bigger stuff, which is good. So again, the commercial strategy of Daftmill is changed by sheer chance, which is really, really good. Or unless Alex is saying he's bought a tank, as in like some sort of defensive mechanism to keep people away from their warehouse, which is also possible.